Hi, everyone, and welcome to Module 1 of Lifespan Development. I am really so excited that you're here. In this course, we're going to be exploring the amazing ways humans grow, change, and even stay the same from the moment life begins until its very end. This first module is all about foundations, and it'll cover chapters 1 through 3 in your textbook. We'll get into some of the big questions of development, such as how we study development, what are the influences on development, and also how our bodies and minds begin forming even before we're actually born into the world. So just a quick reminder, this video gives you a helpful overview of this module, but it's not a substitute for reading the textbook or engaging with our full set of resources. So be sure to check out all the course material to really ground your understanding. So let's jump in by talking about something that we all go through, the life stages. So, when we study human development, we typically divide the life course into these easily digestible periods of development. The chart on this slide shows the stages, the age ranges, and a brief summary of the key characteristic of each stage. But it's really important to note that these periods of the lifespan should not be viewed as rigid guidelines, but only generalizations, or I like to call them widely held expectations. They are not fixed biological truths, but they are ideas shaped by culture, history, and even economics. For example, in some parts of the world, adolescence barely exists as a separate stage. I mean, you can think about your own adolescence as a time where you were still playing and exploring the world with a sense of innocence. In some cultures, at the same age, you'd be working to help support families. And likewise, this idea of emerging adulthood, which is that in between space from about 18 to 25, which many of you watching this video can relate to. But that's a fairly new idea, and not everyone experiences it in the same way. And even within a specific culture, our ideas change over time. Think about your grandparents who may have married and been prepared to marry in their late to mid to late teens. Today, people wait until, their late 20s or 30s to get married or later. The takeaway is that there is no single kind of normal timeline for life. So understanding the differences here helps us approach development with a little bit of cultural humility and a broader lens as we recognize that all cultures may have norms that are different than our own. So let's jump into this thing called human development. Human development is the study of how people change and how they stay the same throughout their lives from conception to death. We examine development through three interconnecting domains. Physical domain, referring to growth, such as height, weight, health, such as like our blood pressure or our heart rate, and our motor skills. Cognitive development, which refers to how we think or process information, how we learn, and how we solve problems. And then psychosocial development, which refers to our emotions, our social skills, our personality, and relationships. While we study these as distinct areas of development, in reality, these domains constantly overlap. For example, your mental health, so your psychosocial development, can affect your memory, your cognitive development, and even your physical development. So, even though we're talking about them as separate things, recognize that they are interconnected and overlapping. So, taking a life course perspective means that we recognize that experiences at any point in life can influence what happens later on. And we'll be talking about that more as we go on. So, with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about the factors that influence development within these domains. So, here's where it gets really personal. And in this class, what I hope you do is really reflect on your development as you're learning about the theoretical aspects of development. I want you to connect into your personal development. So, development is shaped by both our nature, so those genes that we inherit from our parents, and nurture, the environment that we grow up in. But the story is not that simple. The family you're born into, the cultural group you grow up in, and even what's happening historically, like for instance a global pandemic, all shape who we become. One helpful way to understand this is Yuri Bronfenbrenner's bioecological model, which shows how different layers of life, from your school and your family to your culture and government, interact to influence development. We'll build on this idea throughout the course, but for now, let's talk about how we make sense of it all through theory. Theories help us organize what we see and predict what might happen. In this class, we'll focus on four big perspectives. The psychoanalytic perspective, which generally focuses on emotions and early experiences. Learning theories, which emphasize behavior and external reinforcements. Cognitive theories focus on how we think and how we learn. And contextual theories emphasize environment and cultural systems. And so in the previous slide, we talked about Bronfenbrenner, his bioecological model, and his theory falls under the contextual theories. So each theory gives us a different lens. As we learn more about each of these lenses, I want you to ask yourself, which one speaks to you in a way and your way of seeing the world. But how do we test these ideas? Theories are ideas. How do we test them? Let's talk about research. To study development scientifically, we use a range of research methods like observations, experiments, surveys, interviews, things like that. We also use a variety of research designs. So there's longitudinal research designs, which track the same individuals over time to monitor any changes. There's cross-sectional research, which compares people of different ages at one point in time. There's quantitative research methods, which involves collecting and analyzing generally numerical data to draw conclusions. And then we analyze that data with statistical analyses. There's qualitative research methods where we focus on in-depth, non-numerical data to understand social realities. So we're asking things about beliefs and attitudes and motivations of people. And there's also mixed methods research, which combines qualitative and quantitative methods. But regardless of the type of research we're doing, ethics matter. There are historical examples of unethical research that reminds us why informed consent, confidentiality, and protection from harm are so important today. Take a look at some of the supplemental videos to get an idea of these historical unethical practices. So now let's turn our attention to conception and prenatal development. From the moment of conception, development is underway. We divide prenatal development, so the period of time between the fertilization of the egg to the birth of the baby. We divide this period into three stages. Stage one is the germinal stage, which generally is around 1 to 2 weeks. And that's when fertilization occurs and the implantation of the egg into the woman's uterus. The embryonic stage, which is roughly weeks 3 to 8, is when the organs are generally formed. And then the fetal period between week 9 and the birth of the baby is the period of rapid growth and development. The prenatal environment really does matter. A mother's nutrition, stress level, and exposure to harmful substances can shape a child before they're even born. So that brings us to a closely related topic of genetics. Think of genes as the instruction manual for our development. We inherit 23 chromosomes from each parent, and these carry DNA that influence everything from our appearance to our risk for certain conditions. Some traits are determined by a single gene, like eye color, while others are shaped by many genes working together. This is called a polygenic inheritance. Twin studies help us untangle the influence of genes versus the environment, so nature or nurture. Identical twins share all of their DNA, so it's helpful in recognizing kind of differences that happen in twins is probably a function of environment since they carry all the same genetics. While fraternal twins share about half of their genes. And so, looking at twins, either fraternal or either monozygotic or dizygotic, could give us important information. So we'll explore more about this later. But now let's bring it back full circle. So that's a lot of content in the first 3 chapters. I really do hope you spend some time really engaging with the content in your chapters. Here are a couple questions I want you to reflect upon. So ask yourself, can you think of a way that both your genetics and your environment have shaped who you are today? What are some examples from your own experience that illustrate this interaction? And I want you to consider this. After reviewing the major theoretical perspectives, consider which theory you find most compelling for your personal and your professional endeavors. Sorry. So think about the career that you're getting ready to go into. As a nurse or as a psychologist or as a social worker, is there a particular theoretical approach that you generally take or you could see fitting well with your particular career choice? So use your textbook and your other course resources to dig deeper into into this content, and keep these reflections in mind as they'll help you throughout the course. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next intro module.